Okay, we are going to start PowerPoint number 4. This starts on page 101 in your Essentials of Health Information Management book. Okay, so we're going to talk about storage and archive records. So let's start about medical records that we have. They're placed in storage, they're rarely accessed, so they're called archived records or inactive records. Those stored in paper need a large filing area and policies on how long they're going to hold on to these records. So the retention period, again, is the time frame in which a facility holds on to the records. The retention period for these is going to be based on federal and state laws. Digital Archive. It's a storage solution that consolidates electronic records on a computer server for management and retrieval. It can be managed on facilities' internal computer system. It can be outsourced to a company that creates and manages access to digital archives on computer servers. Other types, we have shadow records, which is a paper record that contains copies of the original record and is maintained separately from the primary record. A good example of a shadow record would be, let's say you have a big facility and they have a big record room and they have the complete record room or the complete medical record there. So with the shadow record, ophthalmology could have their own records, radiology could have their own records, but the main record again is going to be in the record room. Independent database. This contains clinical information created by researchers in academic medical centers. So if you're talking Iowa, Wisconsin, or any of them, you're going to talk about the teaching hospitals, the universities that do research. They have all their own research into their own database. And then policies must be established for secure maintenance and HIPAA purposes. Retention laws. Your federal and state laws may prescribe minimum periods that records must be retained. A lot of times they will purge, which means they're going to purge. Facilities may purge their records, remove inactive records from the file system, or convert paper-based records to microfilm or optical disc. So they could, again, scan them, convert them to the microfilm or optical disc. An EHR allows facilities to always have them. And again, a lot of times you're going to look at storage cost. What is going to be the cheapest route to keep these medical records? Is it going to be cheaper to scan them, or is it going to be cheaper just to keep them in an offsite facility? COP. Okay, let's talk about COP. It is the Medicare Conditions of Participation. This will be brought up throughout the semester. And what Medicare Conditions of Participation is, if you want to get paid by Medicare, you have to follow their rules and regulations. So what it is, it requires hospitals, long-term care facilities, specialized providers, home health, to retain their medical records for a period of no less than 5 years. So they have to have them at least 5 years. Once again, if they do less than that, then keep in mind, they possibly won't pay them for any Medicare patients coming to the facility. And then OSHA requires records of employees who have worked for longer than a year to be retained for 30 years. Medicare doesn't have a policy or specify a retention period for like ambulatory surgical services or any HMOs. The Public Health Service Act Immunization Program and National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act specifies you need to hold on to records for immunizations for a 10-year retention period. Okay, usually most facilities anymore, they're just permanently into their system, as they don't want to get rid of those immunizations. Some states base it on their statute of limitations, which is the time period during which a person may bring forth a lawsuit. So retention continued. We have the age of consent. This is age of majority. This means facilities must retain records for a time period, so let's say 18 years, in addition to the retention law. So once a child turns 18, and if their retention law is 10 years, that means they have to keep those records for an additional 10 years. So the child would be, at that point, adult would be 28. The Joint Commission does not mandate retention. The American Hospital Association recommends a 5-year retention period. And AHIMA recommends 10 years for operative room index, and registers should be kept permanently. So this would be cancer register, possibly HIV register. There is a diabetic register, so anything on that. Each healthcare facility must establish a patient schedule for information. What information is going to be retained? What is the time period? And how are we going to store that information? So when a facility starts developing a schedule, they need to look at accreditation agency recommendation. So if they're accredited by the Joint Commission, or if they're an ambulatory, a doctor's office, do they have an accreditation? What are the federal retention laws? What's the legal requirements? They don't want to get, again, subpoenaed to court and not have those records available. The need for continuity of care, and then research, educational uses, and then what are the state retention laws? Alternative storage methods. Off-site or remote storage is used to store records at a location separate from the facility. It is common for the off-site storage area to be part of a company that does store those various type of records in addition to patient records. So you could have a place that's 2 to 3 miles from the facility that not only do they store medical records, but financial records, banking records, again, any type of confidential record. So what are we looking at? If I want to, again, if I am a director and I'm looking at storing my medical records off storage, possibly even computer-wise, I'm going to look at the cost. Storage, they have to be locked, secured. Transportation, is somebody trained that's going to transport these records over to the facility? Okay, are they going to know if the back was open and the records start flying everywhere, what's going to happen? Security, you want to outline the training procedures. Again, you do not want your medical records being at a place that isn't secure, that anybody can get at them. Microfilm, what is this? Okay, so it's a photographic process. It records the original paper record on film, with the film image appearing similar to photograph negative. So then once all these negatives, you have to have a microfilm reader to read these. There is different type of storage on page 104. I would say that microfilming probably isn't overly popular anymore. It can be expensive. I would say that you're going to see more places scanning, putting them on optical discs, that type of. Okay, so your optical disc imaging, this is what I was talking about. It's alternative to your traditional microfilm. Again, it's converted to an electronic image. It's saved. It's laser. And then you're going to use a scanner to capture that paper onto a storage media. Each paper, again, you're going to insert it into a document feeder. It's scanned and then it's saved to the disk. You're going to index it. That means it'll go to the patient that it needs to be by the medical record number or the unique identification number. Okay, so that's the storage. Okay, now let's say we want to destroy medical records because it's been past 10 years. We don't want to save them anymore. Even possibly a site's closing. Nobody wants the records. So now we have to do destruction. So paper-based records should be destroyed in a manner consistent with policy and procedures, again, after the legal retention. Records must be destroyed, so again, they cannot be recreated. And destruction for paper records usually involves dissolving the papers in acid, possibly burning them, or actually crushing them. Now, if you have an electronic destruction, these are going to be by magnetic degaussing, which alters the fields on the computer. Microfilm is going to have to probably be chemically destroyed. It's just kind of a little story here when I go to the yearly meetings for my association on different facilities that don't destroy properly. She was talking about a case out in California where the medical records actually got taken out to the dumpster. Well, they needed a bunch of papers for some type of movie going on in Hollywood, so they collected all these dumpsters with papers in them, not realizing that they were people's medical records. Well, they wanted to develop a storm, whatever, so they had all these records, papers flying around, and then all of a sudden people on the set started realizing these were actual people's medical records with confidential information in them. So again, you can see how well that did not go over and how many lawsuits probably happened from that. Okay, so what happens when a facility closes? These records, the integrity, the confidentiality, it must be maintained when a facility or practice is closed. It has to be followed towards guidelines. The patient records are considered part of the sale. So if the facility is closed, the patient has to be notified, whether you send them a letter, you put them in a newspaper, maybe an email. It has to include the date that the facility is closing, the new location, how to access the records following closure, proper procedure, and there's other examples on page 106. Keep in mind this can be a touchy subject. Years ago in the Dubuque, Iowa area, there was a big grocery store that had, I would say their grocery store closed the pharmacy side. So they went ahead and just sent all the records to another pharmacy, Hy-Vee, didn't notify anybody. Okay, so again, there was a big uproar with that. A lot of people wanted to file lawsuits saying they didn't give them a chance. They didn't know they were closing. They didn't know where their records were going, all of that. So anyway, that is the end of the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, email me.